To the SABC News channel, well, almost 40 years after he died in custody. The inquest into anti-apartheid doctor and trade unionist, that's Neil Aggett's death, will be reopened tomorrow. Aggett died under mysterious circumstances while in police custody. His inquest follows that of another anti-apartheid activist, that's Ahmed Timol, who also died under similar circumstances around the same time as Aggett. Neil's family is convinced that he too was murdered. Let's take a look at this.
I just can't believe it. I just can't believe that he took his own life. He had so much to go for still.
A mother's intuition that his son did not take his own life. The death of Dr. Neil Aggett, a doctor and a trade unionist, was shrouded with uncertainty.
I just can't think of him doing it. He was a tough boy. But nothing could have made him take his life other than, we've all got a breaking point.
His problem started in the early 80s after he was appointed as an unpaid organizer of the Transvaal Food and Canning Workers Union. Soon after that, he became a target. He was arrested in November 1981 and detained at the infamous John Vorster Square, now Johannesburg Central Police Station. That's the last time his family saw him alive. Aggett was found hanging in his cell here. It was February 1982 and he had already been in detention for 70 days. The police claimed he had taken his own life. An inquest also confirmed the suicide claims. Court 18 at the Johannesburg Magistrate Court held a 40-day inquest. Magistrate Pieter Kotsia concluded that no one was to blame for his death, but the family rejected the outcome. But 38 years on, Aggett's family is as determined as they were back then to disprove this version of his cause of death. They are now pinning their hopes on a new inquest.
They want the truth. Did he commit suicide or not? And if he did, why? And if he didn't commit suicide, he must have been murdered directly. We want a finding that he was murdered by the security branch.
In 2016, a fresh inquest into the death of anti-apartheid activist Ahmed Timol overturned a 1972 finding that Timol jumped to his death, ruling his death a murder.
This is fundamentally driven by the families and the agony which they still feel because they don't know what happened to their loved ones. I think that's something very difficult to deal with. And often the official version of what happened to their loved ones, they don't believe, as the finding was in this case.
The Aggett family is also hoping for a similar fate and that they may finally receive some justice. Manqoba Mchunu, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Well, for more on this story, we're now joined in studio by the family's legal representative, that's Moray Hathorn. Good afternoon, Moray, and thank you so much for your time on the SABC News Desk.
Thank you.
Tell me, it's been nearly 4 decades. Why has it taken this long just to reach the inquest level?
Well, of course, there was an inquest in 1982,
yes,
which found that he had committed suicide and that he had been treated very well by the security branch whilst in detention, and yet had committed suicide. So that was the end of the matter until the end of the apartheid era. In 95, 96, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was established. I'm not aware of anybody in the Aggett matter having sought amnesty.
All right. Nobody ever did in that case.
Yes, so really, pending the outcome of that process, the police stopped any investigations which might have been otherwise carried out. One would have presumed that under a democratic dispensation the police would have begun, and they did in some cases, open dockets. But I think they were awaiting the outcome of the TRC process, which ended in about 2002, with the report and the referral of cases, the referral of about 300 cases by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission to the National Prosecuting Authority.
Yes, the TRC handed over 300 cases at that point.
For further investigation and prosecution.
Yes, but many, virtually most, were abandoned.
Well, the process was stopped as a result of political interference. And that issue has been placed before the Zondo Commission, in fact,
Yes.
as to why that political interference occurred and why it was allowed by the NPA. It was the NPA was stopped, the National
Yes.
Prosecuting Authority was stopped by the executive. And in fact, Mr. Picodi
Yes.
has come out to talk about this, as well as Advocate Ackerman SC, who was head of the unit dealing with these matters. And their affidavits have been placed before the Zondo Commission, because it is a very important, historically important
Yes.
example of interference in the independence of the National Prosecuting Authority. And in fact, it may be that it was that interference
That led
really,
to the NPA
really did
dragging
the
at its feet.
NPA no good
All
as
right.
an institution,
Yes.
and which led to these matters being delayed for another 10 years, up until it really only got moving again in 2015.
All right, that was about 5 years ago.
Yes.
Tell me, Moray, we understand that the policeman allegedly responsible for Neil Aggett's death, now they've died while the state has dragged its feet for nearly 40 years.
Yes.
How will this impact on the inquest and the case going forward?
Well, there are some policemen who haven't died, who were part, indeed, of the Aggett team of at least one,
Right.
to my knowledge, was part of the interrogation team.
All right. Well, Conwright and Whitehead
Are
are
dead.
deceased.
Yes. So Whitehead, his death, I think it was about the 25th of April or May this year. May, in fact. It was a Friday, the last Friday in May, when the Minister of Justice announced publicly that the Aggett inquest would be reopened. The very next morning, news filtered through of the death of Whitehead.
All right. Talk us through what happens at inquest level. We just want to get a sense of what happens going forward. How long does it last? Who will be called? We just want to understand the process in the future.
Okay. Well, this inquest will reopen tomorrow. It's really the reopened inquest from 1982. So it's a reopening of the 1982 inquest.
Okay.
It will take place in the High Court in Johannesburg, on one of the big floors, big courts on ground level. It will be presided over by Judge Makume. He will be the presiding officer. The parties there will be the family, of course, whom we represent, and our advocates will be present, and our whole legal team.
Yes.
Then you would have the National Prosecuting Authority, who have a direct interest in the outcome of the matter. They will be present, their legal team will be present. We will lead our witnesses, they will lead theirs, subject to the consent of the judge, of course.
All right.
In these proceedings, it is the judge who makes the final determination as to who may give evidence or not. Also, one would expect those policemen who have been subpoenaed and who might be suspects, their legal representatives will be present as well.
I see.
So we will have quite a large number of lawyers in court. It's been set down for the next 6 weeks.
All right.
I think it'll start tomorrow with introductory comments by legal counsel, preliminary statements, and then there will probably be an inspection in loco of John Forster Square on Tuesday, leading then into our evidence, expert evidence, and then the NPA's evidence, and then the police who might have been subpoenaed to this inquiry. And it's been set down for 6 weeks until the end of February.
All right, Moray. What is the next step for the family? I mean, is this less about prosecution and more about closure at this point? Or do they want to go ahead and prosecute, of course, pending the outcome of this inquest like the Timol family did?
Well, I think that this is This is their truth-finding exercise. I think fundamentally the family want to find out what is the truth.
What really happened
Yes.
on that night.
That, I think, is their fundamental motivation. They've never believed that Neil committed suicide. Of course, it's a possibility. Prosecution in this case might be difficult. We might get a finding of murder, for instance. It's a possibility. But whether we'll get a prosecution for murder is a different thing. Because in this case, unlike in the Timol case, we don't have a member of the security branch who placed himself in the same room at the same instant where Timol died. So, you know, the prospects for a prosecution here might be more difficult.
Thank you, Moray. I'm afraid that's all we have time for. This was human rights lawyer Moray Hathorn joining us on the desk this afternoon.